Is about Doug Leng, my mentor and friend. Many of you know Doug Leng for his long career as a PhD chemical engineer, mixing study expert, and the many contributions he has made to the field. Doug worked for the Dow Chemical Company for over 40 years, but I have known Doug for around 50 years. First working for him and then with him on a non-Newtonian fermentation mixing study in the 70s. That study was intended to increase the production of tuberculosis treatment medication, rifampicin, produced by a mycelial streptomyces bacteria. I will talk a little about that study, but I would also like to cover an AIChE event that we traveled to and attended together in Chicago, as well as his love for sailing the North Channel of Lake Huron. Over the years, Doug and I have chaired our local AIChE section. We also preferred using Apple Macintosh computers over Windows PCs and chaired those in-town clubs as well. The intention of this presentation is not to focus just on Doug's professional career, but on his interests outside of the Dow Chemical Company. So I call this Doug Leng, mentor and friend. First, I'd like to talk a little bit about Dow and Midland. Improving rifampicin production by increasing aeration during fermentation of Streptomyces bacterium. Getting Doug's help in preparing a fermenter for fermentation. Traveling with Doug to an AIChE meeting, and Doug's love of sailing the North Channel of Lake Huron. Doug chairing the local Macintosh users group, and Doug's love of curling. So let's get into it. The Dow Chemical Company covers 2,052 acres in Midland. That's about 3.2 square miles of real estate. Dow and its subsidiaries employs over 7,000 employees and contractors just in Midland, 37,700 as of 2020. Dow split off into three separate companies in 2019, Dow, DuPont, and Corteva. Prior to splitting into three separate companies, Dow DuPont had 98,000 employees in total. DuPont's post-spinoff number of employees is nearly the same as Dow's at about 35,000 when the split occurred in 2019. Doug's career at Dow Chemical. Well, he's a PhD chemical engineer who got his PhD from Purdue University in 1955. He married Marguerite Lambert, a PhD in biochemistry. Both came to Midland and joined Dow the same year. As you all know, Doug's expertise was in fluid mechanics and mixing capability. I joined Dow about 1972 after getting my BS from chemical engineering from Purdue. I found a lot of engineers that Dow employed did get their engineering degrees from Purdue. I joined DIG Engineering, Dow Interdisciplinary Group Engineering, in 1972, and Doug was the director of the lab, and I was assigned to a fermentation mixing study intended to increase the production of a tuberculosis treatment called rifampicin. Doug's obsession with instrumentation calibration. I was asked to host a potential new candidate for the lab. I was taking him around for interviews, and Doug agreed to calibrate probes for the next fermentation run. Now, I have to say that I did not realize that the lab tech that that basically helped me every day in the lab was so intimidated by Doug, but he was. I basically entered the lab with the candidate, and that candidate looked at me in kind of a startled fashion because the lab tech was running back and forth between an overflow trap from the fermenter as Doug was trying to adjust the dissolved oxygen probe adjustment to exactly 100%. Now, I had told Doug beforehand that he couldn't spend, he didn't have to worry about it being exact, that it could be 98 to 102% and it wouldn't matter. And we really needed to do it in about a minute because of the amount of overflow foam that would carry fermentation media out of the fermenter. But Doug was really focused on getting it to just 100%. And the lab tech wasn't willing to tell Doug that an appreciable amount of the fermentation material was flowing out of the 200-liter fermenter that we were using. The long story short, we had to scrub that particular fermentation. And oh, by the way, we did hire the candidate. Another trip I recall is a trip to AIChE meeting on November 30th, I think it was 1976, in Chicago. Doug and I drove to Chicago together, talked about the mixing study, the analog computer that we were using to acquire the data from the various probes we had, and the issues with probes that we were using for temperature, dissolved oxygen, and shear measurements we were taking. Had dinner with my parents at my parents' house since I grew up on the south side of Chicago. And we were basically at that meeting to attend some fermentation study presentations and also some instrumentation automation technology that was being developed at that time. I discovered Doug was originally from Canada during that trip. I had a pretty good idea he was anyway, but and he really loved to sail in the upper channel of Lake Huron. And I got invited to sail the Saginaw Bay to Tawas Point night race scheduled for the summer of 1977. So the next few photos are just Doug enjoying sailing, and particularly when he got up to the North Channel. He always had a smile on his face, even in bad weather, when he was on his sailboat. And I have several shots here, Doug smiling and up on a boatsman's chair on the main mast, with some friends, and Doug and Marguerite on the boat. The Upper Channel is a beautiful place, and there are many inlets like this that you can enjoy if you have a sailboat. Sunsets are spectacular, and you even get some northern lights up there. Just another shot of Doug's boat moored in an inlet. Doug and Marguerite, as I said, always a smile on their face when they're on the boat. And this is the boat in different states of sailing Lake Huron and sometimes Lake Michigan. Full spinnaker and sail, and Doug said it was almost impossible to put this boat on its side, but I thought he could come pretty close with the spinnaker out and in this particular precarious position. Just another shot of the boat that he loved. They really kept it clean. Even a smile on his face even when it was raining. Just some boats moored again in the upper channel. Full spinnaker, full sail. Doug also enjoyed curling. Doug was born in Canada and always loved curling. He started a curling club on an outdoor rink in Emerson Park in the 50s after he joined Dow. But if you know anything about Midland weather, it can be anywhere from plus 20 to plus 30 degrees Fahrenheit to minus 20 to minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit. So the ice conditions can vary wildly, especially if you're, trying to curl. So in 1965, the club that Doug had basically been part of developing built an indoor rink to buffer the conditions they had endured in the outdoors. From 1965 to 2008, that building was the home of the Midland Curling Club. Doug introduced me to curling in 1973. I stayed with it for a few years, and I must admit one of my sons still curls, not every year, but from over the past 10 years, I think maybe 5 or 6 of those years he was curling. So the tradition continues. In 2008, a new curling rink was built across from the community center. A big part of this push for that curling rink was Doug and Marguerite's drive. They were at the dedications for the 1965 building and the 2008 building. What follows are some photos of the curling club facility in Midland and an excerpt from an interview of Doug thinking back over the years and he had enjoyed curling in Midland. So this is the club. There's 4 sheets of ice, a warming area, a kitchen, restrooms, and people enjoy the camaraderie and interaction with one another. This is just an excerpt from the article in 2008 when the building was dedicated. Doug was one of 11 founding members of what was then known as the Midland Curling Club in 1962. He was among more than 100 people on hand Friday in 2008, Friday morning for the grand opening of the $1.5 million, 16,000 square foot Midland Curling Center adjacent to the Midland Community Center. From 1965 through last winter, and the last winter was 2008, the Midland Curling Club was housed at Gerald Court off the Bay City Road. Absolutely, totally excited for me, Doug said, of the opening of the building, which included the 4 curling sheets, clubhouse, kitchen, and some restrooms. This is a dream I could not have believed, to see a building like this. So, over the years since 1984, in the earlier times I was a chair for a local Mac user group called Memoriam. Doug and I both served as club presidents for the local Mac users group. And what follows are some photos of Doug at meetings and giving presentations. Here's Doug. You can kind of get a feel for the size of the place. Doug giving a presentation. He's got a Mac there and an iPad and usually an iPhone positioned somewhere. And in normal Doug Leng fashion, he's always using the hand gestures to get across some point. Listening to another presentation, and basically the club meets once a month and always has some interesting presentations. This is Doug giving a iPhone 5 presentation on the operating system for the iPhone called iOS 7. So all I can say here is thank you, Doug. It's been an honor to work for you and an honor to work with you. The AIChE meetings we attended together helped my understanding of you better. The night sailing race to Taos on your boat was awesome. I am glad you stayed with the Mac and other Apple products even after Dow decided to go to all Microsoft PCs. And thank you for your leadership at Dow, in Midland, in AIChE, and in that Mac Club. I will miss you.